Right here behind this concrete pad is where I've prepared a spot, and I'm going to attempt to build the 12 by 16 shed that you can buy at the Lowe's or Home Depot for over $6,000, but I'm going to try to build it for less than half of that. So I'm strings and line levels laying all over the place because I've been trying to level up the ground real good in order for my floor to be level. As if the floor is not level, nothing else is going to be level or plumb or square. It's just going to get worse from there. This is my starter pack, my first order. This will get me framed up and not quite dried in because I don't have the roof and stuff here yet. And that's one of the places where I'm going to be a little bit tougher than the $6,000 tough shed, because not only am I going to be using 2x6s for the flooring instead of 2x4s or that really ultra thin metal stuff that they use on some of the tough sheds, which looks impressive till you start really looking at it and you see how thin it is. And you think about parking an old car in the yard and how quickly they rust holes in the cars. That's what's going to happen to that metal flooring, is it's going to be close to the ground, it's going to be moist all the time. It's gonna rust like an old car. So I've got treated 2x6s because the other alternative when you buy a shed is 2x4 flooring, and we don't want that. We got full-size 2x4s for the walls and everything, which is another thing that in the tough sheds you do get full-size 2x4s, but in the other regular sheds that are less than the $6,000 and stuff, those aren't 2x4s. Those are like 2x2s or something. They're very small and they're spaced like 24 inches apart. These are going to be 16-inch on center. That's another thing that's going to make our floor nice and stiff. We're going to be 16 on center, not 24-inch centers. Now I like to double and triple check stuff before I move on. So what I'm doing here is I'm laying out a couple of pieces of lumber and a dry run. Excuse me. I'm laying out a couple of pieces of lumber here in a dry run so that I can toss the level on top of them, the 4-foot level. And that one right there with the brick under the corner here is perfectly level. But from that corner to this back corner, it's showing that that back corner is a little high. And it's because I didn't cut back far enough over here. Thought I was cutting back far enough and then some. If you look here where I marked this piece of lumber, yeah, I'm gonna have some cut off in order for the next piece of lumber to go that way. The big 16-footer. It's gonna connect to this corner, but it's gonna be that wide. So it's still gonna come this far, and the dirt is still high right there. It needs to be lower than enough. If anything, it needs to be too low, not too high. And I got to cut back like 6 inches further than I think I should so that it sets down in a pocket, not tightly, but has a little bit of room all the way around. It looks to me like I did that all the way to that corner to about halfway here, and then somehow it kind of notches in right there and gets too tight over here. So one of my cheat codes that I use is I run this little Ryobi tiller across the top. That busts up the dirt real good and makes it real easy to pick up with the shovel into the wheelbarrow and carry it off, which, you know, just takes off like a couple inches at a time as I pass over it. It's not a perfect way to do it, but it's really easy on the old wore out shoulders and elbows. Okay, that looks a lot better. And I've got a little extra room at the back. But if you look here, it's just barely level. So I want to take it down a little bit more. You'd think I want to just leave it like that, but I don't want it just touching the ground. I want something in between it, like over there I've got a brick. The other sheds I built, the lowest corner, I put at least a full block. The reason this one's going so low is because there's going to be a ramp to the doorway, and this is already going downhill. We want the ramp to be as easy to transition as possible, because parts for the eBay store are going to be going in and out of here, so we don't want a steep egress. Now, on second thought, I'm just going to have to compromise and put under each corner and in the centers the 2-inch cap blocks, because if I take that corner down any further, that means I'm going to have to take all this stuff down in the middle too. Otherwise, my joists going across are going to be touching the dirt here and there, and that's not going to be good. That's not going to be good at all. Yeah, that's going to make the daily routine of trying to get up the ramp a little bit more difficult, a little bit more work. But just about everything in these projects is a compromise. I mean, if there were no compromises, then we would build everything out of stone and concrete and steel, and it would all be bigger and thicker. I mean, this wouldn't be a 12 by 16, it'd be 120 by 160 giant building. But we're not the government here wasting your tax dollars, so we've got to compromise and try to do things in an efficient manner. Now, I'm here at the Home Depot to pick up the cap block, which does not come with the shed, but you can see under here there's a couple of cap block under there. There's 2 different thickness cap blocks there, and then there's just one over there on that corner. And here's the price on it that we're trying to avoid, 12 by 16. And we're gonna do double doors, but we're not gonna do the double doors on the end like this is. The double doors are gonna be on the side. That's gonna be another difference. And we're not gonna be doing shingles. It's gonna be metal roof, like this has metal roof on it over here. But it's not gonna be that roof. It's gonna be this regular gable roof, not that gambrel roof, which some people call a barn roof, but that's a gambrel with an R, and this is gable without the R, which is not actually technically a shed roof. A shed roof is like a lean-to, but even the cheap metal things a lot of times don't have a shed roof anymore. You see, got a gable. Okay, so the next step is to actually prep for the next step. And what that entails is I've got the block that I just went and picked up, laid out kind of sort of where it should be. This will be fudged and moved and perfected as I go along. I have my sawhorses set up because each of these are going to have some cut off. This one is about 1 inch longer than 16 foot, so we're going to have to take 1 inch off of it. And then, of course, these have to be cut to 12 foot less 3 inches. So that would be 11 foot 9 inches. And I'll start out by cutting 2 of them so I can make a nice square. Of course, I've got the saw over here. I've got my ball stitch nailer here. Got some more nails, square. A quick square, and this is treated lumber, so it's absolutely imperative that you at least wear a dust mask. You're better off wearing a respirator. You do not want to breathe treated lumber, and don't worry, he won't be breathing it. Shop Cat does not breathe treated lumber or any other lumber, because as soon as he hears that saw, he is out of here, man. Now there's a lot of 12 footers, so I want to show you a trick that I use. You might be asking yourself, well, once you've got one cut, can you line up the edge like this perfectly and then just mark it down here and cut the thing? And well, I do, But once I make the mark here off of the other board, I don't cut to the outside of the line like I did on this previous one. I'll cut to the inside of the line and cut the line off, because when I'm marking here, I'm marking outside of the good meat, so to speak. And I want to leave nothing but the good meat and none of the line. Plus, I have to make absolutely certain, triple checking, to make sure this is exactly the length I wanted. And you saw me checking for squareness to double check and make sure it was absolutely square, because I don't want to make a bad copy of a bad copy. And in addition to double and triple checking this first one, I want to make sure that if we're copying, we only copy the first one, because every copy you make of anything is only as good as the original or worse. It's never better than the original. And just so you know, 11 foot 9 inches is what I'm doing, because these go to the inside of my 16 footers, which means you've got 1.5 inches there, another 1.5 inches of meat there. That's 3 inches of meat in addition to the 11 foot 9. That should add up to 12. And yes, it's still coming out 11 foot 9 inches. And I set the first one aside so I can use it to make my copies, so that I don't accidentally end up making copies of copies, because I'm going to use these first two for the outer edges, and you'll see why in a minute. I did not try making one of these 16 footers into a template and using it to copy off of, because I only have two 16 footers, so I might as well just measure, use a square, and cut both of them from scratch. I'm not really going to pick up any speed by using the copy method. That hack only saves you time if you've got lots and lots of copies of the same thing. And even then, it's very risky, because if you make an error, you could copy that error over a whole bunch of pieces and ruin a whole bunch of stuff. Okay, first corner, and I warned you about this countersinking, and then I ended up countersinking. So what's the problem here? Why is this happening? Well, look, I thought I had like 90 pounds or less. You got to 75 there and the 100 there, and it's showing 100. So there's too much pressure. Let's turn this down a little bit. Okay, now I want to give you a couple more tips, but my disclaimer here is you don't need to be doing this if you're not doing this at your own risk and you're not ready to be burnt, bruised, and bleeding. But you're not saving any money over buying a shed if you end up with a hospital visit, so you've got to be careful. I'm not just lining this up with the top being flush and this being flush right here. I'm also moving my hand far enough out of the way to where if the nail hits something hard in there and curves up and comes out, it's not going to get me in the hand. Because again, that's not saving any money if I have a hospital visit and I could have just bought the shed for what it cost for the hospital visit. All right. And we're still countersinking. Go further down on the pressure. So we're just above 75 now. Higher pressure is also harder on the internal components of the nail gun. So your nail gun's not going to last as long if you're using a lot of pressure. Still countersinking. And you saw me turn that way down, right? Flush there. Still countersinking, but not as bad. Okay, we're down just a little bit below 50 now. That's a lot. That's not a lot of pressure. That's down a lot. That's very little pressure. Seems like every project starts out slow and difficult like this until you get things dialed in, and then once all your tools are where you want them to be and everything's dialed in, things start going a lot faster after that. Look, we're so low pressure now that it's just way out there. Yeah, we backed off too much pressure. Look at that. That's way too low pressure. So let's split the difference between the 50 and the 75. Go in here. Go right in the middle. Look at there. That's almost perfect. Look, the head of that nail is just barely below the surface at 62.5 pounds on that air compressor on that gun. In this wood with those nails, all three of those are factors that can change how deep your nails go in. And now that we got that dialed in, we can cruise. If you're not using a nail gun, or you have to do something like this, make sure you get a foot on there, hold everything really still, because otherwise you're going to knock the whole frame over. It will scoot on you and mess up all your measurements. We haven't really bothered to dial our measurements all the way in yet anyway, so it's not a big critical thing. But it's a good habit to have if you're used hand nailing, to use one of your feet or hands to hold everything still. Now, look at this. I'm nice and flush here, but this is sticking out because this board's got a little bit of a twist to it. So I got to reach down here, grab this, and twist that board a little bit. Make sure it's lined up real good. It's nice to have an air nailer for that because it's hard to do that while nailing by hand. Of course, air nailing brings several new dangers into the job site. And the one most people don't really realize is the hose. You get a foot tangled up in the hose and trip and fall into something, and that is much more likely to happen than shooting yourself with a nail. Here's another little trade tip I learned. It doesn't have to be an expensive tape measure to have this feature. That is a very cheap tape measure right there. Very expensive one. They both have this feature. I'm going down and I'm marking every 16 inches. And it's a lot easier when the tape measure has red at 16 inches. Red at 32, which is a multiple of 16, 48, 64, you can see so on, 80, 96, 112, 128, 144, on and on. Every 16 inches, the numbers are in red. Second tip when doing this is you can see how I hooked on this end and headed that way. If you start on one end like that, you need to start on the same end for the back side. The front and the back need to start on the same end and measure from the same end. This happens to have a very even measurement, but when you're doing additions and stuff on an existing home, you may not have a very even measurement from one end to the other. And so if you go 16 inches, every 16 inches from that way, and then go every 16 inches from that way, you could be way off from one side to the other and everything be crooked. If you look at it from a distance, obviously at this point we're still not square and we're not level either. We've got some more leveling and squaring up to do. That's the next step. I'm just taking care of all this other stuff in preparation for the step after that. And if you're wondering why my voice is sounding a little bit better and not cracking as much, it's because it's not quite as cold as it was this morning. And I'm taking shots of the Victor Allen coffee, which there's a link to in the description of the video. And if you want to see my videos on how the gas chainsaw and the electric chainsaw worked out when I was cutting these oak trees to make room for this shed, there was a big one right there. It was as big as that. and another one right here that was just a little bit smaller than that, but it wasn't as small as that one over there. Anyway, if you want to see that, I'll drop a link in the description of the video too. Just let me know in the comments. And just a little test so we both know. The more expensive tape measure, if I lay it down there and look at my marks, yes, they are in exactly the same place as the cheaper tape measure. I still recommend using the same tape measure from front to back, just in case there is some kind of discrepancy, if you've got more than one brand of tape measure on the job site. But it appears this Milwaukee does have the exact same accuracy on the measurements as this cheap little Hyper Tough. So the marks would have ended up being in exactly the same spot, even if I had used one tape measure on one board and another tape measure on the other. Now to square up, I'm going to measure from outside of corner to outside of corner and just nudge the corners over a little bit until I get 20 foot diagonally. Well, you know, if one is 20 foot, then the other's going to be 20 foot too, but I'd just like to check it both ways. Now at first that looks level, but when you look at it really closely, it actually needs to go up a little bit on that corner. And this is the least wrong one. All the rest of them are very wrong. So we're gonna have to do some leveling out here. Yeah, front to back, we're way off. That back corner is very low. Now the step of leveling up, I have another cheat code that I use, and it's a little car jack. I put it underneath the worst corner, and of course I put my long level on this board over here, and I jack that up until this got level, and it came within a couple of inches of being able to put a full-size cinder block in there. So I just went ahead and dug down just enough to get a full-size cinder block in there. And this one right here turned out to be super close to being perfectly level without much fudging at all. You can see right here a little bit of dirt where I had to clean up the spot where it was at a little bit, but not much, just to get it nice and even. And right there, some more dirt that came out from underneath of it to get it down just enough to where it was perfectly level. But all in all, almost nothing for that corner. And this corner is still pretty much the same as it was. I am going to put a little bit of something that's about 1/2 inch here, because I think when I put that level on there, it's slightly off level, and it looks like a 1/2 inch right there would make it perfect. Of course, I'm going to have to recheck everything. If I put a 1/2 inch under that, that might make this off a little bit, and I might have to put like a 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch under that, which might throw that off. So I will be taking 2 more of these jacks and putting one here and one here to do what I did on this corner and check that out before I go through a lot of trouble shimming and moving things around. I may just leave that corner just a teeny bit low. But I have one more piece left over for the middle here. When I put all these joists in here and this joist goes across, I'll have this one under the center, so that when you walk into the building, if you stand in the middle, which would be the weakest point of the floor, and try to jump up and down or carry heavy stuff, and you walk to the center, the weakest part of the floor will be the strongest part because it'll have that. You also don't want the floor to be able to bounce, like when you're walking, carrying heavy stuff. You don't want a lot of bounce in the floor because these things are not going to be anchored like a house is anchored. And so wiggling and bouncing could make things kind of vibrate and drift. Let's just double check this one at the back again. Yeah, we're actually a tiny bit high on that corner, according to this. So if I do shim that a half an inch, and that makes me have to shim that a half an inch, it looks like I need to shim that a half an inch already anyway. So that should work out. A half-inch shim and a half-inch shim, because this is the tiniest bit off level, and it's that end that needs to come up, and that's the same end that needs to come up over here. Let's just double check and make sure. Yeah, perfect, awesome. So half-inch shim, a half-inch shim, and we're golden. If you're wondering why I didn't go ahead and put all these floor joists in here, I'll go ahead and give you that cheat code tip right now. It's because I work alone a lot. And I'm in the habit of doing things as if I'm going to be alone. And there's only so much I can lift, especially getting up in age now. I'm almost 60 years old. And so I don't need to be, I've already had 4 hernias fixed. They're over $10,000 a pop and getting more expensive for those surgeries, so I don't need any more of that. So I like to have things in a way where I can move them, manipulate them. Yeah, I'm using these jacks, and using these jacks is, even if I put these floor joists under here and it's heavy, all that additional weight, the jacks could still lift it. But, you know, just a mere 10 years ago, in order to shim this stuff, I would just grab that, lift up the corner, and shove a shim underneath of it. I'm trying to keep myself from doing that anymore and use things like the jacks instead. But if I do grab that, not thinking, and shove a shim up underneath of it, at least I'm not lifting 10 additional 2x6s. And to give you an idea of how much extra weight 10 additional 2x6s are, well, there's 10 2x6s. Can you imagine grabbing that and lifting it up in your late 50s? And that's just asking for a hernia. And when it's spread out like that, sometimes you grab a corner and you're thinking, I'm not really lifting the whole thing, I've got leverage, until you popped a hernia, and then you're like, I shouldn't have done that. So yeah, I try to work in methods and routines and habits that prevent me from wrecking me. And I'm kind of glad I do now, because I'd like to pass those techniques down to y'all so y'all don't get hurt or injured either. Look at this dude. He's coming over here to help. Are you gonna come over here and help? He is fat. You're fat. How do you fly? Well, like that. Okay, that answers that question. Yeah, I work alone. Yeah, with nobody else. And you know, when I work alone, I prefer to be by myself. I'm cutting a couple of these at a time. And another trick or hack that I use that I'm going to share with you for working alone is those same 2 jacks. I'm putting one under each end, and I let them hold this perfectly flush before I go and nail them. That way I don't have to have somebody holding them for me. And we're still very level no matter which way I measure it. And it looks like I'm going to get rained on soon. And that's going to be some freezing cold rain too. It's not warm out here. Okay, it's 4 o'clock. It's Friday. I got to go pick up the wifey. It looks like it's going to rain anyway, so we've got to get all this stuff out of the rain. In the next video, I'm going to show you how I do the decking, and we'll see just how far we get from there, and I'll include all that in the next video. And I'll put a link to that right over here. When I get done doing the whole project, I'll put a link to the playlist over here that has the entire project in it. Isn't that right, Tigger? Hey, Shop Cat. Say bye.